Welcome back to the CEO's Off the Record podcast. If you're a business owner, a leader, or someone building something meaningful and trying to do it without burning yourself out or burning your people to the ground, today's conversation is 100% for you. I'm really excited about this episode because we're talking about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the business world: empathy. Empathy in leadership, empathy in business, empathy in operations. And what actually happens when humans are involved in building and scaling companies? Today, I'm joined by Nora Schlesinger, CEO of Nora Schlesinger Consulting. Nora works with female founders and female business owners to help them scale through strong operations, thoughtful leadership, and systems that support their business and the people inside them. Her path has been anything but linear. Nora sold a marketing agency that she was leading that she didn't found. She navigated a major career pivot after that and ultimately chose to build her own business instead of trying to force herself into another job that really wasn't going to fit. Along the way, she developed a strong perspective on leadership, empathy, and why taking care of your people is equally as important as taking care of your business. This is going to be an honest and grounded conversation that I know is going to resonate with many of you. So grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your wine, grab your afternoon margarita, a notebook, and a pen, and let's get right into this conversation. Nora, thank you for joining me today on CEO's Off the Record podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you. I think this is going to be a good one.
I think so too. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get started with, you were originally in corporate. What did you do while you were working in corporate?
A lot of things. But most recently, I ran a content marketing agency, which was focused on SEO, search optimized content. I ran it for 8 years, fully ran it as a CEO for 4. Did I do that math right? Yes, 4. And then I sold it at the beginning of last year and briefly stayed on for about 6 months to oversee the transition from being independent into being part of the new parent company. So that was my last role in a corporate, it wasn't super corporate, in a corporate adjacent capacity.
Okay. And then eventually did you decide to leave, or how did you get out of that role and transition into consulting?
Yeah. So I did decide when I sold the company, one of the parameters of the deal was that they bring everybody on board, including me, partly because it was a service business and you can't really do we didn't have a product to sell. We were an agency. So the people are the value. And so I made that one of the criteria. I also candidly was just trying to protect my team, and I didn't want to sell the company and then have them be out of a job. So we all came over and transitioned into our new roles. My job, as I said, for the first roughly 6 months was to help ease the transition. And we were merging systems. We were getting everybody on board culturally and things like that. At the end of that transition period, I was supposed to move into a sort of like a COO role or a VP of operations or something in the operations realm. Title wasn't a big deal. But at that point, the business needed me somewhere else. According to the founders, they no longer needed a COO. They needed someone sort of in an account management, business development hybrid capacity. And that wasn't me. I had done that job before. I knew that I wasn't happy in that kind of a role. And I had told them that in the past. So we had a very open communication style. And so we had a really frank conversation. And I kind of said, I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I know that you could have just laid me off and you didn't. And I really do appreciate the sort of accommodation. Like they found a role for me where they needed someone. But at the end of the day, I really had to be true to myself and be honest about the fact that this was not a job that was going to make me happy. And hadn't, I had been very stressed running the agency and very overwhelmed. And I didn't want to regress back to that state. It would have been in a different, from a different source, like it would have been a different kind of role. But I think I would have ended up in the same mental headspace in terms of being unfulfilled and unhappy. And I was really transparent with my managers at the time, the founders of the agency that bought my agency. And we had a really honest discussion and a very loving discussion. Like everyone was on everyone else's side. There was no animosity. It was just, I have to be honest with you and with myself. And they were supportive. And so I left after making that decision.
I'm glad to hear you say that you were looking out for your team. With so many businesses laying off nowadays,
Mhm.
surprisingly, the company that I left back in December of 2024 just so happened to have been sold back in December. And then I found out last Monday that people on my team were let go, and
Yeah.
like all kinds of people. The strangest one was the videographer, because I'm like, you know how much a videographer
Mhm.
costs in out there in the world? Like, why would you do that? But none of my business.
Yeah.
But it's nice when the higher ups are thinking about the people that work there.
I mean, that was really my MO as a manager and as a business owner. My team comes first because without them, there is no business. Also, because they're people that I see working hard every day. I respect them. I like them. They're human. They deserve the dignity of the job. That's not to say that I never had to let someone go. I did for lots of reasons, but I tried to be really careful and I did everything I could to avoid layoffs when that was an option. I only had to do one round of layoffs in the entire life of Growth Machine, which was my agency.
Right.
Sometimes it can't be avoided. Like I've seen both sides of it now. I've been in the management seat, in the decision making seat. I understand how things feel different when you're not looking at the numbers. I have also been an employee for the entirety of my career prior to this role. I have lived through another merger. I've worked through another merger or acquisition really as an employee. I've seen what that feels like on the sort of receiving end of it. I have seen what can happen as a result of an acquisition to the team, to the morale, to the culture. So I was very conscientious about how this experience would affect my team. I try to be, and this is my management style, I try to be very empathy forward. I try to really keep excuse me, I'm getting rid of the last dredges of a cold. But anyway, I try, and I don't know if everyone who's ever worked for me would agree with this, but I feel that I've done my absolute best to lead with empathy, with respect, with an acknowledgement of people's humanity and equality. In other words, like I don't act like I'm the manager, so I'm better than anyone or I deserve more than anyone. I think that I try to be very egalitarian, very try to run a meritocracy and just a respectful team. But on the other hand, being in the management role means having to make tough decisions, especially when it's a terrible market, a terrible economic condition. And I don't think I know that's what happened when I wasn't laid off, but opted to leave because I was offered a job different that was vastly different than the one that I was expecting. I know they did their best. I know that they're good guys. And I know how hard it is to sit in that seat, even when it's not a terrible economy, but it really was at the time. It it was what it was. And it resulted in me having the opportunity to do the work that I'm doing now, which I'm so grateful for and so much happier doing. I don't think that the job that I was doing before running the agency, it was circumstantial. I didn't found it. The founder stepped down and left me in charge. And then I sold to this agency that I like the agency. I like the guys who run it, who are the founders. But I just fell into agency life and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to step back and realize, like, I don't think this is the right place for me. I'm going to find the right place for me or make the right place for me, which is what I did.
And how did you come to that realization? Was it something that just like you woke up one day and it hit you and you're like, oh, I can't do this for the next umpteen years? Or was it
Yeah.
a slow process?
Both. I feel like the way my brain works is I process things in the background. And then eventually, when I get to that point of clarity, it's ding, and it just becomes this conscious realization. There were a lot of people that I talked things through with that were, I think, each of those conversations was like a puzzle piece. I also, I think, got really good at just listening to my gut and feeling and being aware of feeling like, why do I feel stress in a situation where I really shouldn't feel stress? Why, if I were looking at someone else doing this job or in this role or in this sort of like situation, I would think they're very happy. This must be a great job, but I don't necessarily feel that way. So it was a lot of putting the puzzle pieces together, I think. It was similar to when I sold. So first I had to, before I could sell, I actually had to buy out the founder's equity. So that was a process of processing sequence of like awareness, processing internally, then processing externally through conversation. And then just, I think, taking a step back and letting all that processing just percolate in my brain. And then suddenly I was like, I have to buy out the founder. I have to own this agency because I'm doing 100% of the work and he's not involved anymore. And it's way more work than I thought I was going to be, than I thought it was going to be. And what am I doing it all for if I don't own the equity? So it's this cycle of awareness that something is not lining up the way it's supposed to be, and then working through it. I always work through things heavily internally before I externalize them. And then working through them externally with trusted people. Every manager should have their people.
I totally agree with you on that. When I used to work for a local municipality, I had a team of webmasters under me,
Mhm.
and we, I never wanted to call us family, and I actually didn't. One of the webmasters did, but
Mhm.
it became this thing where it was almost like us against the world. Like we
Yeah,
stood back to back and would take on all of these experiences and all of these challenges together. And
that's great.
everybody on the team had a special, unique ability. And one of my webmasters asked me, when you put the team together, because I handpicked almost all of them except one.
Mhm.
She said, when you put us together, she said, you just put us together like puzzle pieces. And I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
I just picked the best people. I didn't know we were all going to fit together like that, but
Except
our
I would argue
people
that you
fit.
probably did subconsciously.
Yeah.
I think you were looking for similar,
Hmm.
maybe you were looking, or maybe you just are, you connect with similar types of people again and again.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear you say that, like, I didn't do it on purpose. I think you did. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit.
It's interesting because there were, I want to say 20 different departments, and I knew what I was hiring for. I said, okay, I'm
Mhm.
going to break the departments up. So when for Department of Social Services and the health department and
Mhm.
all of the touchy-feely departments, I knew the kind of person I needed over there. And
Yeah,
of course,
makes
the building management and some of the construction and hardline, I knew what I wanted there. And it just so happens that when you put those people together, they can also cross pollinate. And one makes the other a little stronger, while the other one makes this one a little softer. And we fit together so beautifully. It
it's
hurt me
amazing.
to leave.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
know what you mean.
That says so much about you as a manager, though,
Mhm.
that you were so at home there and that everyone felt so like they belonged. And that also, from a cynical capitalist perspective, that also is great for productivity.
It
You want
is.
people to want to come to work for more than productivity, obviously. You want people to be happy at work. You want them
Mhm.
to feel like they belong and they're welcomed and they have friends and they have support and all those
Yeah.
important pieces. It's more than just showing up and doing the work.
Exactly. Exactly. And when I left, one of the webmasters became the web services manager. She took my spot and I went
Nice.
over to a different like division of the municipality.
Mhm.
And when I left there, she came over, took my spot there, and one of my other webmasters became the web services manager. And they're still in those positions. And I
That's
love that.
amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
many managers don't build redundancy into
Right.
their teams.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty advanced maneuver that you did there.
Yeah. Yeah. It all worked out. It was meant
Yep.
to be. It was
It
meant to
sounds
be.
like it. Yeah. That's
Now, your
great.
career over time, it's taken this weird route. When you look
Yes.
back, it's gone
It's a little bit
roundabouts,
wonky.
but when you look back, what roles or experiences did you have in the past that were extremely critical to set you up for success in what you're doing now?
All of them.
Mhm.
Every single one. And I sound a little like glib saying that, but I'm completely serious. I think that some of it wasn't obvious until way beyond the job itself. Most of what I've done in my career and most of the variety of industries and roles that I've had have come back in one way or another to inform my decision making, my management style, my courage, my self confidence when I needed it the most. One example is I worked in a parking garage, not parking cars, but I worked for a parking management company. So they actually like, fun fact, the person who owns the parking garage is not the person who typically runs the parking garage in like big, like urban parking garages. So this was in downtown Chicago. There are companies that are contracted to run the operations of the parking garage. So I worked for one of these management companies, but they put me in an office in a parking garage. I was seeing the day to day. I learned so much about operations, but specifically about pricing. Like I think most of my most salient pricing decisions were informed by my time in a parking garage, which sounds insane. But there were all these little nuances about so Chicago loves to tax everything. And so there are these tax thresholds where it's not like it's never a straight percentage. It's never 10% goes to taxes or whatever. It's like from this dollar amount to this dollar amount, it's this flat fee of taxes. From this to this, it's this flat fee. So it was a pretty sophisticated pricing strategy to maximize your profits after taxes because you couldn't just say, oh, how much can I charge? Because there was a point at which if you charged $1 less, you would be actually netting more money, more profits. And I really learned to like think critically about the whole package of a price and what goes into it and what we're taking out of it, not just like how much can we charge. That was a really interesting sort of perspective, I think, on almost anything in learning to think past the obvious. I learned a lot there though, honestly. I worked briefly in the financial services industry in a marketing capacity, but I was like very plugged in. It was basically like me and one other person in marketing. So we were pretty embedded in the sales team. I learned a ton about sales. I'm not the biggest fan of I don't really like doing sales. I don't think I'm very good at it, but I learned so much. I know how it at a very high level. I know how it works. I was able to understand the jargon. This was when I was like 23 or something. I ran the Salesforce. I was like the Salesforce system administrator. So I learned things like the difference between a lead and a prospect or lead. These are things that at the time I was like, okay, who cares? Then, fast forward however many years, I'm running this agency, the sales situation is in shambles. And I was like, okay, I have to rebuild the whole sales process. And I was like, what do I do? But then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Deep down, somewhere in my brain, I actually have a lot of knowledge about sales and pricing. And so I was able to draw that out. I'm not saying I'm a sales expert or a pricing expert, but it got us far enough that I could then hire an expert to take over. But I was able to build the foundation. The other thing is, I think in order to hire effectively, you need to know something about the job you're hiring for, particularly in sales, because I'm sorry to say that I've seen a lot of people who can only sell themselves and nothing else. And so you have to be able to sniff out some BS, and you need to be educated in the topic at hand in order to do the sniffing effectively. I have a million I have a million stories like that. I worked in the music industry. That taught me a lot of things, a lot of things. A lot of like interpersonal skills came out of working jobs that I honestly thought this is a waste of my time, but in retrospect, it wasn't. It was actually a fantastic experience. And I met people I wouldn't have otherwise met. I had experiences I would have otherwise not had. The list goes on. So I'm genuinely serious when I say I believe that every single completely insane job that I've had. The jobs themselves were not insane, but like the sequence of them was truly insane for one career. Every single job was meaningful and was valuable. And I learned something or met someone or experienced something that I don't think I would be where I am now if not for that, the privilege of having been through that.
I'm glad to hear you say that because so often when I work with my clients, they say, Jessica, I don't have a skill. And I'm like, everybody has a skill because you've had past
Yeah,
experiences.
like,
And
have you lived? Have you crawled out from under your rock? Then you have skills.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's the
I bet
way
they're
you
women
look at
mostly
things.
because women love to undervalue themselves and
Yes.
their
Yes.
experiences.
We're good at that too.
So good. Myself included. I'm not,
Mhm.
there's no shade. This is,
Right.
I'm first in line.
Exactly. I spoke this weekend with someone from my old job. They were giving me the rundown of what was going on.
Mhm.
And she said, made mention. I said, when I worked at IBM, she said, wow, Jessica, she said, how many lifetimes have you lived? And at first I was like, excuse me, I'm not that old. Excuse you. And she's much younger than me. So I'm like,
Yeah.
exactly. But when you think about it, it's like I do have a
Yeah.
lot of back
Yeah.
knowledge that I can draw from. And so when you're looking to start a business or go, you've got a lot you
Mm.
can pull from, but you got to look at it not as just, oh, those are just jobs I work.
Yeah. You do have to think a little bit creatively and dig a little bit deeper because I think a lot of people, particularly when they want to start a business, but not exclusively, if we're talking about applying for a job that's a little bit different than what you've done before, or even like honestly trying a new skill or hobby or something, there is always something to draw from, unless you've literally been like under a rock for your entire life. If you're an adult human and you've lived, there is something to draw from. You may not be fully like skilled, trained, ready to go, but you can always make connections to something you've done in the past. Even if it's not an obvious connection, you can always tell the story to yourself, to a hiring manager, to whoever about why you're ready, why you can do this, what you bring to the table. Everybody brings something unique and something impressive. It's just different for every individual.
That's what makes it wonderful.
Yeah.
The interweb of humans, there's 8 billion people on the planet, and everybody is completely different. That's
Yeah.
why the world keeps turning. If we were all the
Yeah.
same, this thing would have stopped
How
turning a long time
boring.
ago
Yes, that's true.
and
If
would be
we
very
all did
boring.
the same job the same way,
Sure.
where how would anything happen? Like we
Exactly.
need that diversity of perspectives, we need that diversity of experience.
Mhm.
I always say you could hold my children hostage and I still couldn't tell you where a single person who worked for me went to college because I don't care.
Yeah.
I care that they went to college. I care that they're like educated, but more so I care, what have you done since college? What else have you done? I care that they're well-rounded people, they're thoughtful people, they have interesting minds, they're creative, they work autonomously well, they work on a team well and respectfully and collaboratively. I care like what job they took after college a lot more than where they went to college.
Exactly.
I know that's not always appropriate. You don't want like a plumber who's never seen a pipe before, obviously. So This varies, but I think that you have a lot more leeway in a business environment than people give themselves credit for. And I think you may not always need an MBA to be able to be a manager. You may not. I think that some of the most valuable lessons that I learned about management have not been from graduate school. And I'm not saying I didn't learn, I learned a lot of important things. I'm glad I went, but I also recognize that not everyone needs to go or has the privilege of being able to go to graduate school. And I don't think that makes you a less valuable or less capable manager.
Exactly. Let's pivot a little bit into the business that you run now because
Mhm.
you talk about and emphasize empathy, particularly in management and operations. What does empathetic operations actually look like in practice?
I think it means more than just saying we're a people first organization. It means action, not words. You can use those words, but you better be doing a lot behind the scenes, managerially and financially, to back that up. I think that means things like what I was talking about when it comes to cost cutting, like really considering layoffs as a last resort. Not I know the layoffs aren't like the first thing people go to, but making sure that you have creatively considered every other possibility. But in a less extreme scenario, I think it means offering the best health insurance you possibly can at the lowest cost to your employees. So even though we were a small business, we were not hugely profitable. We always paid 100% of the premium for the employee and 50% for their dependents. So it was a very low, and it was always like very good insurance. I was on the insurance too. So I was choosing something that was good for all of us. I wasn't just looking at the cost. If the manager is not on the insurance, they should imagine that they are on the insurance, and would this be sufficient for their needs? It means doing what you can to offer great PTO, great benefits, great parental leave, facilitating a work-life balance, and facilitating a good life outside of work, removing as many concerns as you can reasonably that would prevent someone from being able to come in and perform well at work. So some companies offer childcare. My husband's company offers some benefit that provides backup childcare. So if your kid's sick and they can't go to daycare, there's some service. I've never used it, but I think the way it works is you can call somebody, because that's a huge concern for parents and a huge reason why they call out of work. This is all, at the end of the day, good business. It might be higher overhead, but if you think about all these things and in the most cynical capitalist lens, providing backup childcare means your employee comes into work and is productive that day. It means they're not taking a sick day. It means they're not working remotely while trying to take care of a kid, which is incredibly stressful and takes time for the parent to like mentally recover from and work wise recover from. I think that it even goes to something as seemingly minor as like how you have conversations with your people. You hired someone because you thought they were an expert in this capacity. So let them do their job. And so when I would argue that when a manager starts micromanaging and forcing someone to do the job a certain way that does not affect the outcome, it's just what they like, I would say that's not people first management, in my opinion. I think that there were times when I had to really stop myself and think, okay, they've made a reasonable suggestion. Am I disagreeing with it, or am I tempted to disagree because there's a real concern here, or because I just didn't think of it that way? And so I had to really do a lot of work, and I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes, but I tried to be very conscientious of how I was talking to my people, how I was empowering them, how I was elevating them in their role, how I was giving them autonomy, whether I was being honest and transparent and treating them like adults and not talking down to them. It's about respect and humanity and as much equality as is reasonable in the situation. You still have to be a manager, you still have to be in charge. Sometimes you have to draw a line or make a tough decision. So this is all within reasonable boundaries, obviously. But at the end of the day, don't make a separate set of rules for yourself and your executive team than you would hold your least senior person to. Don't make life worse for your less senior people than you do for your more senior people. We see that and hear stories about that in corporate America every day, and it's infuriating and it's so disrespectful. So it's really, you mentioned at the beginning that the word I kind of use for my management style is empathy. And that's really all it is. It's putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Would I feel good if someone spoke to me this way? Would I feel good if someone kept this information from me? Would I feel good if someone cut costs and suddenly my insurance doesn't cover as much as it used to? And now I have to find the money for my medication or my therapist or my whatever. It's just empathy.
Yeah.
It really is that simple.
When you work mainly with women, it's particularly in women-led businesses.
Yeah.
What patterns do you see in women leaders that, or their approach, I should say, to leadership that varies differently for better or for worse?
So I feel like this could be an entire podcast discussion in and of itself. But I would say the number one thing that comes to mind is this empathy piece. I think that women are much more, for better and for worse, more prone to lead with empathy. What that translates into is I see teams both of women and reporting to women. I'm speaking in generalizations here. There's always exceptions, but generally being a lot more loyal to their female manager or founder than to male managers or founders. I feel like it's a different type, a deeper and stronger and more interpersonal connection between female founders and female leaders and their teams. On the flip side, though, they tend to be a lot more involved in not always a very good way. So I would say that empathy often translates into, I'll just do it myself. I'll just take that off your plate for you. I can't ask you to do that. Or just this feeling of, this is not empathy, but just this feeling of, if I don't do it, no one will, or no one will do it as well as I will. Female founders generally have a very hard time delegating. It's a skill. I think that, like I said, this could literally be an entire podcast discussion in and of itself, but I think it goes to how women are socialized versus men and how women are socialized to be doers and helpers and supporters and encouragers, and men are taught to be comfortable. And I'm just going to get off that tangent before I take the entire rest of our time.
Gotcha.
But I do think that's at the root of it. Women are socialized to be takers off of plates, and men are told to hold light plates. And so women do this for other women. And it's not like a gender thing. It's not like between genders. I see female founders with female teams, and the female founders are very burned out because they compulsively do everything themselves. And they generally have very capable, very willing, very underutilized teams. And they're at the top, like ready to snap. So I do think the sort of, I don't know if you call it all, I don't think it's all empathy, but the more emotionally invested management style is both an asset and a detriment to leadership. And I try to coach my clients, who are all female founders and female leaders, to really practice the skill of delegation and gain comfort and be willing to sit with your discomfort until it stops being so uncomfortable, and watch other people do their jobs, which a lot of female founders have trouble letting someone else do the job that they had been doing so that they can move on to the more visionary work of running the company.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because when I first became a manager, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like,
none of us do. No one knows what they're doing.
This is not what they taught me in business school.
Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah. The reality is so different than the academic depiction of what management is like. And it's so much more emotionally I don't want to say draining, but like it takes so much more emotional investment.
Yeah.
They don't teach you, they don't even acknowledge that in
No,
business, at least not in the
not at
program I was
all.
in. But it was like, what good is all of this if you're just this robotic, my spreadsheets are perfect and my team is optimized? But then what?
Right?
Like you were talking about with your team earlier, like people stay,
Hmm.
they work hard, they come in with good attitudes, they can think more clearly, they're more productive, they're more,
Right.
if they are invested in, if the company cares about them, if their managers care about them and know them, if their coworkers,
Hmm.
if they connect with their coworkers and their coworkers care about them, all these things matter
Yeah.
more than the textbooks
Yeah.
will tell you. And I think
Absolutely.
women get that, but
Hmm.
sometimes like almost overcorrect and are like very emotionally invested and very, another thing I run into a lot is a lot of female entrepreneurs are also perfectionists. And so without anyone managing them to spot and
Hmm.
maybe mitigate their perfectionism, that tends to be something that gets to them after a
Yeah.
while. Part of my job is to systems and standardize things. And another part of it is just to be like, hey, I see you being a perfectionist. It's good enough.
Hmm.
Just leave it at good enough and save your sanity. So I end
Right.
up doing a lot of that sort of like support because that's something that I really wish someone had done for me when I was at that point. And I had to do it for myself,
Hmm.
which is really hard. I just try to, my consulting work at its core is built on being the person I wish I, like the support system I wish I had.
Yeah.
And I built it, but I just wish there was somebody like me, like
Hmm.
what I'm doing now,
Hmm.
that I could have relied on when I
Yeah.
needed it the most.
Now, you mentioned perfectionism, which is something I still to this day struggle with.
We all
And
do.
I've been doing my business now for over a year and
Mhm.
I'm getting better
Yeah.
ish.
It's not a switch you flip.
It's
It's
not, it
every
was
single
hard.
day an improvement, trying something new,
Yeah.
observing that you're like a little bit less uncomfortable doing something that makes you uncomfortable. It's a it's a process,
Mhm.
but it's a ongoing one for in perpetuity, pretty
Right.
much.
Right.
You're never going to
Exactly.
be like, oh, I'm not a perfectionist anymore.
Right.
Because if you weren't, if your brain didn't work like that, you probably wouldn't be an entrepreneur. You
Hmm.
wouldn't be successful
Yeah.
without having perfectionist tendencies. And I didn't bring that up because I think people shouldn't be perfectionists. I think you have to learn to pump the brakes sometimes when other priorities need that energy instead. You know,
Right.
when it's more important for something to be done and really good than for you to keep working on it and it be perfect.
Mm.
You might miss a deadline. Then who cares if it's perfect? So
Right.
it's that kind of thinking.
Yeah. And that's what I had to learn the hard way. It wasn't perfectionism for the sake of perfectionism, but perfectionism for the sake of I've been working on this same thing for 14 hours straight.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like,
Enough is enough.
enough is enough.
Yeah, you have to let yourself tap out at some
Exactly.
point.
Exactly. Do you see any other characteristics in the women that you work with that you would deem as necessary, but could end up being a hindrance in their business?
Yeah, I would say probably like a little bit of people pleasing. And so I think that this does, if there's a spectrum of people pleasing, some amount of that spectrum is really good because it breeds empathy, awareness, connection. You are, in order to be a people pleaser, you need to be aware of people's needs and states around you. That's good. What
Mhm.
you can't do is get so invested in the pleasing that you lose sight of what you need, what the business needs, the big picture, what everyone else needs, etc. I've seen situations where there's a squeaky wheel on the team and the manager keeps trying to de-squeak the wheel, but in doing so loses sight of like their role and their seniority and ends up kowtowing to this squeaky wheel person, and also loses sight of the fact that like the squeaky wheel might be complaining about something, No one else on the team of 30 is complaining about this thing. That's why I say there's a spectrum, and you have to make sure that you're closer to the productive end of the people please. It's more of a people awareness, people connecting
Mhm.
place that you need to be in, not all the way to people pleasing, because that then you sacrifice everything else just to make sure everyone is happy. And your job as a manager is not to make everyone happy. It's to provide a really healthy workplace and team and corporate culture. But not everyone's going to be happy every day. You can't control that. You can't control other people's feelings.
No,
This has
no.
been, that's a big learning that I had to go through and still have to go through and remind a lot of my clients of.
So, if someone right now is listening and they're in the middle of a messy career transition, what advice would you have for them that you wish you had heard before you got to this point?
That's such a good question. I think just keep going and find your support system.
Mm,
The other thing that I really try to think about is, what is this going to look like in X amount of time? So, like, when I look back in a year
mm,
or when I look back in 5 years, is this really going to look as catastrophic as it feels right now? Probably not. So I try to remember, I like visualize myself sometimes in a much bigger, I don't know, realm, like a much bigger like timeline than what it feels like. Cause I think if you're in a messy place in your life, that's all you're aware of
mm,
is this, the like the walls feel like they're closing in, that this is the only part of life that feels relevant and tangible right now. But you have to remember it's hard
mhm,
and it sometimes isn't meaningful at the time, but you have to keep practicing. Like, you have to remember how much you've lived, how much you have left to live. Is this it? Are you done? Just because something's hard? No, you're not. Please don't be.
mhm.
Keep going, find your people, find your support system, build a support system if it doesn't exist. You would be shocked, pleasantly so, by how many I have been when you like people want to help. People want to be there for you. I have reached out to people thinking like, "Oh, I'm wasting their time. They have too many other things to do." And like, I have just been blown away by how willing people, like, these are sometimes people that I don't even know that well, or people that I am not really sure is like someone with this expertise. Like, just reach out to someone if you're feeling like the walls are closing in and you can't handle this tough time alone. But also remember that it's just part of the story.
Oh my goodness, that reminds me, I am presently, currently, in the middle of decluttering.
Oh, wow. That's a big job.
No, it's huge because I've
Yeah.
got stuff that I never should have brought with me from one apartment to my house that I was in for
Yeah.
10 years to
Yeah.
now this apartment. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was doing was I was going through, what did I want to keep? What did I want to leave?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at all of my journals and I'm like, "Ooh, that was a rough patch. Ooh,
Yeah.
I can't believe I made it through that." And you
Yeah.
don't know until you look back and see where you were
Yeah.
because life kept going. And so you just kept,
Yeah.
and it's, oh, I made it.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
be darned.
I have this mantra that I started telling myself many years ago, which is like something along the lines of, there's always a solution. You just may not have found it yet. And so I think that has kept me really agile. When I decided to leave the last company the buyers, I didn't have a lot of notice. I literally had, I think, something like 48 hours notice or something. And then suddenly I was like, oh, I'm unemployed. Fun. And it was a tragic I mean, it still is a terrible job market, but it was just awful. And so I started applying for jobs, and it very quickly became clear that this was like not going to go in my favor. And I also realized I don't really want any of the job. I was relieved that I wouldn't hear responses and I would get blown off and whatever. So then I just kept thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to get a job. How are we going to survive on just my husband's income? Like, then I was like, wait a minute. I haven't considered a lot of other things. So I thought about my skill sets. I thought about things I've had ideas for in the past. I thought about things that have interested me about previous jobs or about my previous experience. And I realized I had always had this very quiet, because I didn't think it was going to be possible, dream to advise female founded businesses or female founders specifically about their operations. And operations was something that I really loved for a long time, but never really had much of an opportunity to focus on. I was a COO for a year, and that was like the happiest I've ever been in a job. And so I was, wait a second, what do I have to lose? So I built myself a website while simultaneously continuing to apply for jobs that I was like not excited about and didn't actually want. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep trying things. I brainstormed a list of, here are all the things that I could potentially do for a short term or even maybe long term job. I just had to think outside the box and think beyond the initial solution. And that's when I found what was the right fit for me at the time and still is.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I know that connects with other people that are watching this right now, because
I hope
we've
so.
all had that moment where I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work for another company or another manager. I want to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought, I've done this for so long and I've done so many jobs where I was like settling. I don't want to do that again. I'm middle-aged now. I'm in my 40s now, and the time is now. If not now, when?
Right.
And there's a lot of privilege in being able to say I went for it and I started a business, not really on a whim, but looked like it was on a whim. I get that's not something everyone can do, and that's not something that I encourage people to do if they can't afford to take that risk for any reason. But I would also say, I think you can probably afford a little bit more risk than you give yourself credit for, because there's always a solution. Have a backup plan, have 3 backup plans, be doing 2 things at once. If you're trying to get something off the ground, you can also be applying for jobs, which is what I did for the first couple months. And then I finally started to put myself out there more, and I booked some clients, and I was able to stop applying for jobs, which was such a delight.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a sign right here that says, if not when, if not now, when, if not you, who, you must act now. And it's just a reminder that keeps me focused on what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I have something similar. It's a line from a poem. It says, "This is not a dress rehearsal before a better kind of life."
Thank you. I love that.
Kate Baer is the poet. She's phenomenal. She has a couple books out. I highly recommend them. Okay. It's not relevant to my job or anything. It's just good literature, good book.
I love that.
Yeah. And I'm not a poetry fan, but her stuff's fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nora, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
A great conversation. You are such an inspiration.
Thank you.
I am really excited to see what types of things you do next.
So much.
How can people contact you if they are interested in picking your brain?
Sure. The 2 best places to find me are LinkedIn. I think it's just LinkedIn/in/Nora Schlesinger, all one word. Or the easier way to find me is noraschlesinger.com. You can get to my LinkedIn from there. You can also contact me from that website and learn more about me if you're interested.
Awesome. I am going to put all of your details in the show notes of the podcast and in the description of the video. I am so grateful to you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And I know my folks loved it.
I'm so glad. I'm so grateful that you invited me. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. So for everybody that's watching, remember, you can subscribe. You can subscribe to the podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to watch us. work and talk as we talk through all the different things that we talk about on this podcast. And for everybody, I will see you all same place, same time next week. Have a good one. Bye.